When a boy turns 18 in the system, he doesn't get a party. He gets a file, a bus ticket, and a handshake from a man who has shaken 1,000 other hands just like his. He inherits a legacy of paperwork and the quiet, echoing absence of a family. They said my late father left me a boarded-up mill, a worthless relic on a forgotten patch of land. What I found inside wasn't just about the past. It was about whether I had a future at all. And if you've ever felt like you were starting from zero, with nothing but ghosts at your back, then maybe you'll understand this story. Hit that subscribe button, because we're going to get through it together. The day I aged out was gray. Not the dramatic, storm-brewing kind of gray, but a flat, tired dishwater gray that seeped into the concrete of the group home walls and settled in my bones. It was March. The air still had the bite of winter, but the slush on the ground had the defeated look of a battle already lost to a spring that was taking its time. I stood on the porch of the Northwood Youth Residence with a single duffel bag at my feet. The bag contained 3 changes of clothes, a worn copy of a book I'd read a dozen times, a toothbrush, and an envelope with $482 in it. My transitional stipend, they called it. It sounded official, important. It felt like a joke. Mr. Henderson, the facility director, stood beside me, his hands in the pockets of his perpetually rumpled trousers. He was a good man, I suppose. He had the weary eyes of someone who'd seen too many kids like me come and go, their futures as uncertain as the morning fog. "Leo," he said, his voice a low rumble. "You got the address for the shelter?" I nodded, not trusting my own voice. The word felt like sandpaper in my throat. Shelter. For 18 years, I'd been in a series of places that were not quite homes, and now I was graduating to one that didn't even pretend. "And the number for your caseworker?" Another nod. He sighed, a little puff of steam in the cold air. "Look, kid, it's not easy out there. You keep your head down. Stay clean. You'll be all right." He clapped me on the shoulder, a gesture meant to be reassuring that felt more like a push. And just like that, it was over. 2 years at Northwood, 6 before that at a foster home in the suburbs, a blur of other placements before that. A whole life distilled into a final, awkward goodbye on a cracked concrete porch. I walked away without looking back. Looking back wasn't a luxury I could afford. There was nothing there to see. My father, Michael, was a ghost story, I told myself. I had one faded photograph of him, holding me as a baby. He had a tired smile and the same dark, unruly hair as me. He disappeared when I was 3. My mother died a year later from an illness that was always spoken about in hushed, vague terms. After that, the state became my parent, a vast and indifferent guardian with a 1,000-page rulebook and no time for bedtime stories. For years, I imagined my father as a villain, the man who had abandoned me. It was an easy story to believe. It was simpler than the complicated, messy truth of not knowing. It gave my anger a place to live. 2 weeks into my new life at the downtown shelter, sleeping on a cot that smelled of bleach and desperation, I got a letter. It was forwarded from Northwood, the envelope thick and creamy, bearing the letterhead of a law firm, Sharma and Associates. I opened it with trembling fingers, expecting a bill or some final piece of bureaucratic nonsense. Instead, it was an invitation. Ms. Anya Sharma requested my presence at her office to discuss a matter pertaining to the estate of my late father, Michael Vance. My heart hammered against my ribs. Late father. The words were a punch to the gut. I'd always assumed he was gone, but seeing it in black and white made it real. The ghost was finally buried. The law office was in a part of the city I'd only ever seen from a bus window. Glass towers scraped the sky, and people in sharp suits moved with a purpose I couldn't comprehend. Ms. Sharma's office was on the 24th floor. The view was dizzying. She was a woman in her 40s, with sharp, intelligent eyes and a calm, professional demeanor that was somehow comforting. She didn't treat me like a file or a problem to be solved. She treated me like a person. "Leo," she said, gesturing for me to sit. "Thank you for coming. I'm sorry to be the one to tell you this officially. Your father passed away 6 months ago." I just nodded. I didn't know what to say. How do you mourn a man you never knew? "He didn't have much," she continued, sliding a folder across the polished mahogany desk. "No money, I'm afraid. In fact, he had significant debts. But he did have one asset. He left it to you in his will." She opened the folder. Inside was a deed, yellowed and brittle at the edges. It was for a property in a town I'd never heard of Oak Haven, New Hampshire. The property was listed as the Blackwood Creek Textile Mill. A mill? I asked, the word feeling foreign on my tongue. He owned a factory? Miss Sharma gave a small, sympathetic smile. Not exactly. It's been defunct for decades. Boarded up. From what I understand, it's little more than a ruin. And I have to be honest with you. It's more of a liability than an asset, she explained the situation. The mill sat on 12 acres of land, but it came with nearly $10,000 in unpaid property taxes. Worse, a development corporation, Titan Holdings, had placed a lien on the property years ago for an old business debt of my father's. They were now legally entitled to seize the property to settle that debt. They've made an offer, she said, pushing another document toward me. They'll forgive the debt and pay off the back taxes. In exchange, you sign the deed over to them. They'll even give you $5,000 for your trouble. $5,000. To me, it was a fortune. It was a security deposit on an apartment. It was a new wardrobe that didn't come from a donation bin. It was a chance to eat something other than ramen and shelter stew. It was a way out. The smart choice. The only choice, really. Why would they want a derelict mill? I asked. The land, she said simply. It's on the river. They want to tear it down and build luxury condos. Of course they did. I looked at the photograph of the property attached to the file. It was a black and white aerial shot. The mill was a hulking brick beast, its windows dark and empty like vacant eyes. It looked sad and lonely, a forgotten giant sleeping by the water. For some reason, I felt a strange pang of connection to it. A forgotten place left by a forgotten man to his forgotten son. I have to advise you to take the offer, Leo, Miss Sharma said gently. It's the cleanest way to handle this. You walk away with a fresh start, no strings attached. I should have said yes. Every rational part of my brain screamed at me to sign the papers, take the money, and run. Start a new life, unburdened by the ghosts of a man who'd never been there for me. But something held me back. A flicker of what? Curiosity? Spite? I didn't know. I want to see it first, I said, the words surprising even me. Miss Sharma raised an eyebrow. Leo, it's a 6-hour bus ride. There's nothing there for you, he left it to me. I said, my voice barely a whisper. It's the only thing he ever gave me. I just want to see it. She studied my face for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she nodded slowly. All right. The offer from Titan Holdings stands for 30 days. Go see your inheritance. Just be careful. Places like that can be dangerous. She handed me a large, rusty iron key. Your father left this with his will. It's for the main gate. The key was heavy in my hand, cold and real. It felt less like a key and more like a question. A question I suddenly needed to answer. The bus ride to Oak Haven was a journey through a landscape of fading Americana. The city's gleaming towers gave way to sprawling suburbs, then to strip malls and fast food chains, and finally to rolling hills and dense forests of pine and birch. The towns grew smaller, the houses farther apart. I watched the world go by, my reflection a ghostly presence in the tinted window. For the first time, I was completely on my own, heading toward a place I didn't know, to see a building I didn't want, left to me by a father I couldn't remember. The $400 from my stipend was now a little over $300 after the bus ticket. It felt like my life force, draining away with every mile. I thought about my father. Michael Vance. Who was he? Why did he leave? And why, after all these years of silence, did he leave me this one broken thing? Was it a final, cruel joke? A burden to saddle me with from beyond the grave? Or was it something else? The anger I had cultivated for so many years felt thin and brittle now, like old paper. Beneath it was a deeper, colder feeling, the profound, aching grief of a boy who had never known his dad. I clutched the iron key in my pocket, its sharp edges digging into my palm. It was the only tangible piece of him I had, besides that one faded photograph. Oak Haven wasn't so much a town as a crossroads with a post office, a general store, and a diner called the Rusty Spoon. The bus dropped me off in front of the store. A light drizzle had started, chilling the air and making the asphalt of the road gleam. I pulled up the hood of my jacket and looked around. The town felt suspended in time, quiet and unassuming. I went into the general store to ask for directions. An old man with a magnificent white beard sat behind the counter, reading a newspaper. He looked up at me over his spectacles. "Help you, son?" he asked. I'm looking for the old Blackwood Creek mill, I said. The man's friendly expression tightened almost imperceptibly. Not much to see there. Hasn't been open since before you were born. What business you got with the old mill? His tone wasn't hostile, just wary. Small towns have long memories. It was my father's, I said. He left it to me. The man's eyes widened slightly. He put down his newspaper. You're Michael Vance's boy? I nodded. He was silent for a moment, studying my face. Well, I'll be. You've got his eyes. Name's George. I knew your dad. Not well, but I knew him. He was a quiet man. Kept to himself. He gave me the directions, a mile down the main road, then a left onto a dirt track called Mill Lane. Be careful out there, son, he said as I left. That place has been sleeping a long time. Best not to wake it up too fast. The walk down Mill Lane was like stepping into another world. The paved road gave way to gravel, then to a rutted dirt path overgrown with weeds. The trees crowded in, their branches forming a dense canopy that blocked out the weak afternoon light. The air grew damp and smelled of wet earth and decaying leaves. After about 15 minutes, I saw it. A high, chain-link fence, rusted and sagging, topped with coils of barbed wire that were slowly being swallowed by ivy. And behind it, the mill. It was even bigger than it looked in the picture. A 4-story brick monolith, its roofline jagged against the gray sky. Most of the windows were boarded up, but a few on the upper floors were just dark, gaping holes. A massive brick chimney, tall enough to touch the clouds, stood sentinel beside the main building. It wasn't just a ruin. It was a cathedral of decay. The main gate was secured with a heavy chain and a padlock that looked like it had been fused shut by years of rust. I slid the iron key Miss Sharma had given me into the lock. For a heart-stopping moment, I thought it wouldn't turn. I put my shoulder into it, twisting with all my strength. With a tortured groan of metal on metal, the lock clicked open. The chain fell away, clattering against the gate. I pushed, and the gate swung inward with a long, low screech that echoed through the silent woods. I stepped inside and pulled the gate shut behind me. The sound of it latching felt final, like I was sealing myself inside a tomb. The grounds were just as wild as the woods outside. Weeds grew knee-high through cracks in the asphalt of a vast, empty parking lot. A rusted-out pickup truck sat near the main entrance, its tires flat, its paint peeling. It looked like it had been parked there one day and simply forgotten. The air was heavy with an unnerving silence, broken only by the drip of water from the eaves and the distant caw of a crow. I walked toward the main building, my footsteps crunching on the gravel. The scale of the place was overwhelming. It was built to last, a monument of industry from a bygone era. Now, nature was slowly, patiently reclaiming it. Thick ivy climbed the brick walls, its green fingers prying at the mortar. I tried the main entrance, a set of huge double doors made of heavy oak. They were locked tight. I walked the perimeter of the building, testing windows and other doors. Everything was sealed, boarded up, chained, or rusted shut. A knot of frustration and despair tightened in my chest. Had I come all this way for nothing? Was I just going to stare at the outside of this brick fortress and then turn around and leave? Defeated, I sat down on the steps of the loading dock, the damp cold seeping through my jeans. I looked out over the property. The mill was situated in a gentle curve of the Blackwood Creek, which gurgled and rushed over a bed of smooth gray stones. Despite the decay, there was a strange beauty to the place, a peacefulness. It was then that I saw it. Tucked away at the back of the building, almost completely hidden by a thicket of overgrown lilac bushes, was a small, unassuming metal door. It was painted the same dark red as the brick and had no handle, just a keyhole. It was a service entrance, maybe, or a fire escape. My heart started to beat a little faster. I pulled out the iron key. It was too large for this lock. My hopes sank. But then I remembered something else Miss Sharma had given me. Tucked into the same envelope as the main gate key was a smaller, simpler brass key. A house key. At the time, I'd thought it was a mistake. Now, I fumbled for it in my pocket. With a surge of adrenaline, I pushed aside the wet branches of the lilac bushes and slid the brass key into the lock. It fit perfectly. I turned it, and with a quiet click, the door unlocked. I pushed it open and was met with a rush of cool, musty air. I had found my way in. The darkness inside was absolute. It was a physical presence, thick and suffocating. It smelled of dust, damp concrete, and something else, a faint, metallic scent, like old oil and cold machinery. I fumbled for my phone, my fingers clumsy in the chill, and turned on the flashlight. The narrow beam cut a path through the gloom, revealing a small utility corridor. Pipes and electrical conduits snaked along the walls and ceiling, covered in a thick layer of cobwebs. I stepped inside, pulling the heavy door shut behind me. The click of the latch echoed in the confined space, and for a moment, I felt a spike of panic. I was inside the belly of the beast. I moved slowly, sweeping the flashlight beam back and forth. The corridor opened into a vast, cavernous space. My light couldn't even reach the far walls. I was standing on the main factory floor. Huge, silent shapes loomed out of the darkness, the machines. They were enormous, hulking metal skeletons arranged in long, neat rows. Weaving looms, carding machines, spinning frames. They were dinosaurs from another age, coated in a shroud of dust and rust. Shafts of pale gray light filtered down from grimy skylights high above, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air like tiny ghosts. The silence was profound. It was the silence of a place where thousands of people once worked, where the roar of machinery once shook the very foundations, now fallen utterly quiet. It was a heavy, listening silence. I walked down one of the aisles, my footsteps echoing unnervingly. I ran my hand over the cold, pitted surface of a loom. It was hard to imagine this place full of life and noise. It felt more like a museum or a mausoleum. I explored for what felt like hours, moving from the main floor to smaller workshops, storage rooms, and boiler rooms in the basement. Everywhere, it was the same story: decay, abandonment, and the slow, inexorable march of time. I felt a growing sense of disappointment. Miss Sharma was right. It was just a ruin. There was nothing here for me but dust and sad memories that weren't even mine. The $5,000 offer from Titan Holdings started to sound better and better. Then I found the office. It was on the second floor, overlooking the main weaving room through a large plate glass window, now opaque with grime. The door was unlocked. Unlike the rest of the mill, this room felt different. It was smaller, more human-scaled. There was a simple wooden desk, a chair, and a filing cabinet. But there was also a narrow cot in the corner with a rumpled sleeping bag, a small hot plate, and a stack of books on a makeshift shelf made of cinder blocks and a plank of wood. Someone had been living here. My father. My flashlight beam played over the desk. It was covered in a thin layer of dust, but not the thick, ancient blanket that covered everything else. He hadn't been gone that long. There were papers neatly stacked, schematics for machines, old order forms. And in the center of the desk, placed deliberately, was a small, locked metal cash box. It was old and slightly rusted, but sturdy. There was no key. I tried to pry it open, but it wouldn't budge. I looked around the office for something to use as a lever. My eyes fell on the filing cabinet. I pulled open the top drawer. It was empty. The second drawer was also empty. But the third drawer, the bottom one, wouldn't open. It was locked. I rattled it, frustrated. Then I noticed the key. It was still in the lock of the office door. A small, silver key. On a whim, I took it out of the door and tried it on the filing cabinet. It slid in smoothly. I turned it, and the drawer unlocked. My breath caught in my throat. I pulled the drawer open. Inside, there was only one thing: a single, thick manila envelope. My name, Leo, was written on the front in a strong, unfamiliar hand. His hand. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely pick it up. I sat down in the dusty office chair, the springs groaning in protest. I tore open the envelope. Inside were two things. The first was a small, ornate iron key that looked like it belonged to a piece of antique furniture. It was the key for the cash box on the desk. The second was a letter. Several pages, folded together, covered in that same handwriting. I unfolded the first page and began to read. My dearest Leo, it began. If you are reading this, it means I am gone. And it means that against all odds, you have found your way here. I am so sorry. Those are the words I have wanted to say to you for 15 years. I am so sorry I left you. I had to stop and take a breath, my eyes blurring with tears I didn't know I had. This was it. The explanation. The story I had waited my whole life to hear. I continued reading, the words on the page painting a picture of a man I had never known, a life I had never imagined. He wrote about my mother, about how much he loved her. He wrote about her illness, a rare genetic disorder that required expensive treatments not covered by insurance. He'd been a mechanic, a good one, but he couldn't keep up with the medical bills. He took on extra work, side jobs, anything to make ends meet. That's when he got into trouble. He started doing transport jobs for a man he knew, no questions asked. He needed the cash. At first, it was just sealed crates, moved from one warehouse to another. But then he found out what he was really transporting. It wasn't goods. It was evidence. Forged documents, laundered money, things that connected powerful people to very serious crimes. The people he was working for were not just shady, they were dangerous. When he tried to get out, they threatened him. They threatened my mother. They threatened me. He was trapped. After my mother died, he knew he had to disappear. They wouldn't just let him walk away. They would use me to control him, or worse, they would get rid of me to tie up loose ends. So he made an impossible choice. He staged his own disappearance, making it look like he had run out on his debts, abandoning his son. He used his knowledge of the criminal network to create a new identity and vanish. He knew the state would take me, that I would be safe in the system. Safe, but alone. It was the hardest thing I have ever done, Leo, he wrote. Walking away from you was like tearing out my own heart. But it was the only way I could protect you. They would have destroyed you to get to me. I chose to let you hate me so that you could live. The mill was his sanctuary. He'd bought it for a pittance years before, a failed business venture, a foolish dream. But in his exile, it became his fortress. He lived here, off the grid, a ghost in his own life, always looking over his shoulder. He watched me from a distance, he wrote. He had a friend, an old army buddy, who would check on me, sending him grainy photographs and updates. He knew which foster homes I was in. He knew I was safe, and it was killing him. I never stopped being your father, the letter concluded. Everything I did for you. This mill, this broken place, is all I have to give you. I hope you can find it in your heart to forgive me. Inside the cash box, you'll find a little something to help you get started. It's not much, but it's a beginning. You're beginning. Be better than me. Be happy. All my love, Dad. I sat in the silence of the dusty office, the letter trembling in my hands, and I cried. I cried for the father I never knew, and for the man he had been, a man forced to make an unbearable choice. I cried for the years of anger and resentment I had carried, a heavy stone in my heart that had suddenly turned to dust. I cried for the lonely little boy who believed he had been abandoned, and for the young man who now understood he had been protected. The entire narrative of my life had been a lie, a story I'd told myself to survive. The truth was harder, messier, and infinitely more painful. But it was also filled with a fierce, desperate love that reached across the years to find me in this dusty, forgotten place. This is probably a good time to pause, because what I just read changed everything I thought I knew about myself. And maybe you've had a moment like that in your life, a moment where the ground shifts beneath your feet and you have to decide who you are all over again. If this story is hitting home for you, if you've ever had to grapple with a difficult truth about your family, let me know in the comments below. You're not alone in this. This channel is a community for people who have been through the fire and are figuring out how to rebuild. Your stories matter. Now, let's get back to that office. I sat there for a long time, the tears drying on my face, the letter clutched in my hand. The grief was a physical weight, but underneath it, a new feeling was starting to bloom, a sense of purpose. My father hadn't left me a ruin. He had left me a story. He had left me the truth. I looked at the metal cash box on the desk. I picked up the small, ornate key from the envelope and slid it into the lock. It turned with a satisfying click. I lifted the lid. Inside, nestled in neat stacks, was cash. A lot of it. I counted it carefully, my hands still shaking. It was $20,000. $20,000. It was more money than I had ever seen in my life. It was enough to pay the back taxes on the mill twice over. It was enough to rent an apartment, buy a car, go to community college. It was the fresh start Ms. Sharma had talked about, but it was real. A gift from my father. My first instinct was to grab the money and run. Disappear, just like he did. Leave the mill, the town, the whole mess behind me, and never look back. It was the sensible thing to do. It was the safe thing to do. But then I looked at the letter again. Be better than me, he'd written. What did that mean? Running felt like a repetition of his life, not an improvement on it. It felt like an escape. I thought about the offer from Titan Holdings. They wanted to tear this place down, erase it, build something shiny and new on its ashes. They were the ones who held the lien, the ones whose pressure had contributed to this whole situation. It felt wrong. This mill, this broken, beautiful place, was the last piece of my father. It was his home, his sanctuary. It felt like a part of me now, too. Selling it to them felt like a betrayal. I looked out the grimy window at the silent, sprawling factory floor below. My father hadn't just hidden here. He had lived here. He had survived here. For me. The decision solidified in my chest, a hard, clear certainty. I wasn't going to run. I wasn't going to sell. I was going to stay. I was going to fight for this place. I didn't know how. I didn't have a plan. All I had was a rusty key, a box of money, and a story that had turned my world upside down. But for the first time in my life, I felt like I had a choice. A real one. And I was choosing this. I was choosing him. I spent that first night in the mill, sleeping in my father's old sleeping bag on the cot in his office. It was cold, and the strange groans and creaks of the old building settling were unnerving, but I felt safer than I had in years. I felt like I was home. The next morning, I walked back into Oakhaven. The sun was out, a weak but welcome presence after the drizzle. The town looked different in the light, less gloomy, more peaceful. I went straight to the diner, the Rusty Spoon. A woman with a warm smile and a tired face was wiping down the counter. "Coffee?" she asked. I nodded. "And whatever's good." She served me a plate of eggs, bacon, and toast that tasted like the best meal of my life. I ate slowly, thinking. I needed information. I needed a plan. I paid for my meal and went to the town hall, a small brick building next to the post office. A clerk, a woman named Brenda with a formidable perm, looked at me suspiciously when I asked to see the public records for the Blackwood Creek Mill. "Interest in the old place, have you?" she asked, her voice sharp. "It's mine," I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "My father left it to me." "Michael Vance," her expression softened, much like the general store owners had. "Oh, you're Michael's boy. We heard he passed. I'm sorry for your loss." She showed me how to use the microfiche machine, an ancient piece of technology that hummed and whirred like a spaceship. I spent the rest of the day scrolling through decades of property tax records, deeds, and zoning permits. I learned that my father had bought the mill in a foreclosure auction nearly 20 years ago. I saw the records of the mounting back taxes, and I found the lien from Titan Holdings. It was for a $50,000 business loan he had taken out and defaulted on. It was dated just a few months before he disappeared. Something about it felt off, but I couldn't put my finger on what. That evening, I called Miss Sharma. I told her I wasn't taking the offer. I could hear the surprise in her voice. "Leo, are you sure? $5,000 is a good offer for a property with that much debt against it, I'm sure," I said. "I'm going to pay the back taxes myself. I want to keep it." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Leo," she said, her voice careful, "that's nearly $10,000. And even if you pay it, Titan Holdings still has the $50,000 lien. They can and will foreclose on you to collect it. You'll pay the taxes and lose the property anyway. There has to be a way to fight it," I insisted. "I need you to look into that lien." "Something's not right about it," she sighed. "All right, Leo. It's your inheritance. I'll start digging into the lien. But this is going to be an uphill battle. A very expensive 1-inch." I knew she was right. But I didn't care. I had the money from the cash box. It was a war chest. My father's last gift. The next few weeks fell into a routine. I moved into the office at the mill, making it my own. I bought groceries in town, a new sleeping bag, and a propane camp stove. I spent my days cleaning. I started with the office, sweeping away the years of dust, washing the grimy window until the light streamed in. Then I moved to the factory floor. It was a monumental task. I started in one corner, with a push broom and a snow shovel, and began clearing away the debris and grime. It was backbreaking work, but it felt good. With every square foot of floor I cleared, I felt like I was reclaiming something, not just for me, but for him. The people in town started to notice. George from the general store would give me a nod when I came in to buy supplies. The waitress at the diner, whose name I learned was Sarah, started saving me the day-old muffins. They were wary, but curious. I was an outsider, but I was Michael Vance's boy, and that seemed to count for something. One afternoon, George stopped by the mill. He pulled up in his old pickup truck and got out, looking up at the huge brick building with a wistful expression. "Haven't set foot in here in 30 years, he said, his voice quiet. Used to work here in the summers when I was a kid. He told me about the mill in its heyday, how it was the lifeblood of the town, employing hundreds of people. He talked about the noise, the energy, the sense of community. It died a slow death, he said, his eyes sad. The world changed. Cheaper to make things overseas. He looked at me. Your dad. He had a dream for this place. He wanted to bring it back. Not as a big factory, but as something else. Workshops for artisans, a place for people to make things with their hands again. He had all these plans. My father had a dream. He wasn't just hiding here. He was planning a future. George's story lit another fire in me. This wasn't just about saving a building. It was about honoring a legacy. But the letter had mentioned something else. A second part of the story I hadn't uncovered. He never explicitly stated what happened to the evidence he was transporting or what became of the dangerous people he was working for. His story felt incomplete, as if he'd left out the final, most important chapter. I reread the letter a dozen times, searching for a clue. Nothing. It was a dead end. I became obsessed with searching the mill. If he had hidden $20,000 in a cash box, what else might he have hidden? I started a systematic search of the entire building. I tapped on walls, lifted floorboards, explored every dusty corner and forgotten storeroom. It was a massive undertaking. The mill was over 100,000 square feet of space. It felt like searching for a needle in a haystack the size of a mountain. Days turned into weeks. I was running out of time. Miss Sharma called with bad news. The lien from Titan Holdings was ironclad. They had all the paperwork. They were moving to foreclose. We had a court date in less than a month. My $20,000 wouldn't even cover half of the debt. I was going to lose. I felt a familiar wave of despair wash over me. I had been a fool. I should have taken the money and run when I had the chance. I had let a ghost story and a sentimental dream lead me to ruin. That night, I sat in the office, defeated. I was ready to give up. I looked around the small space my father had called home. My eyes fell on his desk. It was a big, old-fashioned oak desk, heavy and solid. I had cleaned it, but I hadn't really examined it. On a whim, I started opening the drawers again. They were all empty, just as they had been the first time. But as I slid the bottom right drawer back in, it snagged on something. It wouldn't close all the way. I pulled it all the way out and set it on the floor. Reaching into the back of the desk cavity, my fingers brushed against a piece of paper taped to the underside of the desktop. I pulled it free. It wasn't paper. It was a photograph. A picture of one of the giant weaving looms on the main factory floor. It was a specific one, the third from the end in the second row. A small red X was drawn in marker on the floor right in front of it. It was a map. My heart hammered in my chest. I grabbed my flashlight and ran down to the factory floor, my footsteps echoing in the cavernous space. I found the row, counted the looms. The third one from the end. I shone my light on the floor in front of it. It was covered in the same thick layer of dust and grime as everything else. But there, right where the X should be, I saw it. A faint set of lines in the concrete. A square, about 3 feet by 3 feet. It was a trapdoor. I had swept right over it a dozen times without noticing. My hands shook as I scraped away the dirt. There was no handle, but I found a small notch along one edge. I ran back to the office and grabbed a crowbar I'd found in a maintenance closet. I wedged the tip into the notch and pulled with all my might. The concrete slab was heavy, sealed tight with years of grime. I grunted with the effort, my muscles straining. With a final, wrenching pull, the seal broke. The slab lifted with a grating sound. I heaved it over onto its side, revealing a dark, square hole in the floor. A hidden compartment. I shone my light down into the darkness. It wasn't deep, only about 3 feet. And at the bottom, there was another metal box. This one was much larger than the cash box. It was a military-style footlocker, painted olive green. It looked heavy, and it was sealed with 2 sturdy latches. It took all my strength to haul it out of the hole. I dragged it across the factory floor and up the stairs to my office. I felt like I was dragging my own destiny behind me. I set it down in the middle of the floor and stared at it. This was it. The final chapter. The latches weren't locked. I took a deep breath, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs, and I flipped them open. I lifted the heavy lid. The first thing I saw was another envelope, just like the one before, with Leo written on the front. Beneath it, the footlocker was filled with notebooks, binders full of documents, and a small, velvet bag. I opened the letter first. Leo. It began, the handwriting the same, but somehow more urgent. If you found this, it means you didn't run. It means you stayed. I am so proud of you. I hoped you would. I hoped you had more fight in you than I did. I told you part of the story, the part you needed to know to forgive me. Now you need to know the rest. The truth is, I never stopped fighting, he went on to explain. The company he had been working for was an illegal waste disposal operation, a shell corporation run by a much larger entity. They were dumping toxic industrial waste, barrels of chemicals, into abandoned mines and quarries all over the state. The documents he was transporting were the falsified environmental reports, the doctored permits, the secret payoffs to local officials that made it all possible. The parent company behind it all, Titan Holdings. The loan my father had taken from them wasn't a real loan. It was a trap. When he discovered what they were doing, he started gathering evidence. He copied documents, took photographs, recorded conversations. He was building a case against them. They found out. The loan was their leverage, a way to ruin him and discredit him if he ever went to the authorities. His disappearance wasn't just about protecting me. It was about protecting the evidence. He knew they would stop at nothing to get it back. I was a coward, son, he wrote. I ran. I hid. I had all this proof, but I was too scared to use it. Scared they would find me. Scared they would find you. I chose to keep us safe instead of doing what was right. But you can be braver. Everything you need is in this box. It's all there. The real ledgers, the photos, the names. It's enough to burn them to the ground. I put the letter down, my mind reeling. My father wasn't just a victim. He was a whistleblower. A man who had tried to do the right thing and had been crushed by a powerful, corrupt system. And Titan Holdings wasn't just a development company. They were criminals. They didn't just want the land for condos. They wanted the mill because they wanted to ensure that whatever secrets it held stayed buried forever. The lien, the foreclosure, it was all a sham, a legal way to seize the property and control the narrative. I opened the binders. It was exactly as he described. Page after page of damning evidence. Shipping manifests, chemical analyses, bank statements showing huge, unexplained payments to shell companies. There were photographs of rusted barrels piled high in a remote quarry. There were maps with dumping sites marked. It was a meticulous, detailed account of a massive criminal conspiracy. Finally, I picked up the small velvet bag. It was heavy. I loosened the drawstring and poured the contents into my hand. Gold coins. Dozens of them. Old, heavy, gleaming gold coins. A note tucked inside the bag read, "For your legal fees. Go get him, son." It was a pirate's treasure. A war chest for a battle he had been too afraid to fight himself. But he had left it for me. He had left me the choice. I could take the money and the gold, disappear, and live comfortably for the rest of my life. No one would ever know. Or I could stay. I could fight. I could use this evidence to finish what he started, to clear his name, and to get justice. It wasn't even a choice. Not anymore. I knew what I had to do. I had to be better. I had to be braver. The next day, I drove to the city. I had used some of the cash to buy George's old pickup truck, the one that had been sitting at the mill. He sold it to me for a song, happy to see it running again. I walked into Ms. Sharma's office on the 24th floor, but this time, I wasn't a scared kid. I was carrying a footlocker full of truth. I laid it all out on her polished mahogany desk. The letters, the binders, the gold coins. I told her everything. She listened, her eyes widening as the story unfolded. She read through the documents, her expression shifting from skepticism to shock, and finally to a grim, focused intensity. When I was done, she was silent for a long time. She looked at the evidence, then she looked at me. "Leo," she said, her voice filled with a new respect. "Your father was a remarkable man, and Titan Holdings is in very, very big trouble." The legal battle was long and ugly. Titan Holdings had a team of high-priced lawyers who tried to paint my father as a disgruntled, criminal debtor. They tried to paint me as an opportunistic kid looking for a payday. But the evidence was undeniable. The documents, the photos, the ledgers, it was a perfect paper trail. Miss Sharma was brilliant. She brought in state and federal investigators. The story hit the news. The Oak Haven Mill inheritance, they called it. The story of the son who uncovered his father's secret fight against a corporate giant. The foreclosure was thrown out. The lien was declared fraudulent. The back taxes were waived in light of the criminal investigation. The state attorney general filed a massive lawsuit against Titan Holdings for environmental crimes and fraud. Their stock plummeted. Executives were indicted. They were, as my father had predicted, burned to the ground. I won. We won. The mill was mine, free and clear. My father's name was cleared. He wasn't a deadbeat who abandoned his family. He was a hero who had tried to do the right thing. The weight I had carried my entire life was finally lifted. In the end, there was a settlement. A large one. The money was a strange, abstract thing. It didn't feel real. What felt real was the mill. I went back to Oakhaven, not as a visitor, but as a resident. I didn't want to sell the mill. I didn't want to tear it down. I wanted to fulfill my father's dream. It's been 2 years now. The work is slow. I'm not restoring the whole place. That would be impossible. But I've started with a small section, one of the old workshops. I've repaired the roof, put in new windows, run new electrical. With help from George and a few other folks from town, I'm turning it into a shared workspace. A place for a woodworker, a potter, a glassblower. A place for people to make things with their hands again. I live in the office, the one my father lived in. I fixed it up, but I left his desk right where it was. Sometimes, late at night, when the mill is quiet, I sit in his chair and look out over the dark, silent factory floor. I feel him here with me, not as a ghost, but as a presence, a legacy of love and quiet courage. What I inherited wasn't a building. It wasn't money or gold. It was a second chance, a chance to build a life, to create a home, to finish a story. My father gave me a foundation, and now it's up to me to build something on it. It's the hardest work I've ever done, and I've never been happier. My story started with an ending, the end of my time in the system, the news of my father's death. But it turned into a beginning. And that's the lesson, isn't it? That sometimes the things that seem like ruins, the burdens we think we've been left with, are actually the starting point for something new. They're the foundation for the person we're meant to become. So I want to ask you, what have you inherited? I don't just mean money or property. I mean the stories, the struggles, the quiet hopes of the people who came before you. What foundation are you building on? Let me know in the comments. I read every single one, because this community is built on sharing the real, messy, beautiful truth of our lives. If this story meant something to you, please subscribe and join us, because we all deserve a second chance to build a place.
Okay, I think that's everything. Now we need to go back to... I need to finish this game. That's fair, Lucifer. I mean, it's also one of those games where I feel like you can just take your time, you know? Also, where did Mewtwo go? Hello? Oh, okay. Also, hey, Summer. Good to see you. I just need to finish the storyline. I mean, that's fair. I also took my sweet time. Like, we had put in so many hours already, and I just finished the story, like, last stream. How are you feeling? How was your day? I'm feeling a lot better, Summer. For sure. And my day was great. Question is, where do we move Mewtwo into? Because we don't really have a home yet. Awkward. Mewtwo, that's awesome. Yeah, Junior, we just found Mewtwo. It was so cool. Good, I'm glad. I literally joined your stream yesterday as soon as you went by. Oh, sorry, Summer. Wait, there's a treasure over there. Now I have to go see what it is. Wait, there are 2 treasures. Okay. How's Pokopia been tonight? Honestly, really good summer. We did our like daily run to like get materials and stuff like that. And we found Mewtwo, so that's been pretty great. And we got a mysterious late.